Hey, welcome to this week's Bible study. Um, we'll start out with a little bit of confession time. Today is a little bit hard. Not gonna lie, fought through some challenges and obstacles. We didn't get the room that we were hoping to get today. Arriving a little late, and they was given to someone else. And beyond that, even just finding the motivation, encouragement to get through this particular section of our Bible study, which we'll be picking up at chapter 2 of John, verse number 6. But, because it's not necessarily the most exciting verses, right? It's more of a teaching of a way of getting an insight into Jewish culture and their ceremonial laws and stuff like that. Like, so if you ever read through the book of Numbers or Deuteronomy, some areas can be tough to get through, but it does help a little bit of understanding it more. But there's not a lot of like application and digging into like how it can apply to your life, because it's just pretty much like sitting through a class, right? That you've been through in college, that you're not most um, excitable things. But I think it's still important to that if we take the time to understand the word beyond what we read, that it does help kind of expand our understanding of Jewish culture and what the timing was of what Jesus went through and his people, right? But another thing has been like me finding the encouragement and motivation to continue the ministries that God's called me to. So keep me in your prayers. Um, you know, my wife had to remind me today that obedience is better than sacrifice, the scripture says. And that kind of had to wake me up from where I'm at, because I have to realize that if God's called me to this, then I got to be faithful and committed to it, no matter if my flesh or my eyes want to see more of a greater movement one way, on a more positive way. Because, we all want certain things, right? So we never try and do things in life but not like have any expectations. It's a hard thing to have, but that's definitely something that I'm fighting through. That when we do our ministries out in the community and we're not getting a response from the community that we're expecting, um, I got to change that perception, right? Or the responses on social media when we're putting out these Bible studies and such. I'm very extremely grateful for those who are plugged in, have been showing love, and I really, really appreciate it. But that's the fight of my flesh. I have to go through that. I have to overcome that, that my expectations, and that's something that I've struggled with. So I struggle with that for sure today. So keep me in your prayers again. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I really, really do. Another thing was been like with all those challenges today. Another thing I've been struggling with all my life has been procrastination. And so I've been putting it off, trying to find the right time and to do it, but it's just better to just do it. So we're going to do it. So bear with me as I get through this introduction and through these Bible studies. So we will get through maybe a couple verses instead of just one today, and maybe hit up next week some of the more other parts that may be more suited to having applications. So, all right, let's get to it. Verse 6 of chapter 2 of John. Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. Now the 6 stone water jars were normally used for ceremonial washing. Um, when full, the pots would hold 20 to 30 gallons. That's a lot, right? Think if you have a gallon of milk, that's a good amount. But these water pots could fit 20, 30 gallons of water. And if you think about it, it's like, man, that's a lot of water, right? But they really, really needed them to go through their process of ceremonially washing them, because they needed to go through that process, because God set up these laws to set the Jewish people apart from the people of their time, that they were set apart from the Philistines and the Sumerians and all the other different people, the Babylonians, the Persians, Assyrians, right? They God set them up in a way that they weren't like everybody else, and they were ceremonially clean. Um, so according to the Jews' ceremonial law, people became symbolically unclean by touching objects of everyday life. So when you're going about your day and maybe you're a butcher, right, and you're touching and cutting up meat for to sell to the people, you'd be considered unclean because you've been touching raw meat and all this, and that's like common to us right today. That yeah, you touch raw meat or you're doing things that are unclean, you wash your hands. But back in those days, uh, you know, it wasn't that normal because they didn't have the understanding that we do have now regarding um, how bacteria. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about viruses. They didn't know that being clean is extremely important to your health. They wouldn't be as critical, but God knows that, right? God knows all truth, and He was trying to impart that to His people, the Jewish at the time, that the way for them to have the best, healthiest life was to go through these processes of keeping themselves clean. And so that's what these water pots were used for. Before eating, especially before eating. So think about that, right? Like these people back in the day would go and do things, whether it's use the bathroom or other things that are considered dirty even now. Like they wouldn't necessarily clean their hands, but because of God's wisdom that He's passing on to the Jews, they had these laws, ceremonial laws, which is now like common sense laws, right? That they would have to pour water over their hands to cleanse themselves of any bad influences associated with what they had touched. So that's what it was for, which makes common sense to us now, right? You do something unclean, wash your hands, but that wasn't commonplace. So verse 7 says, Jesus said to them, meaning the servants, fill the water pots with water. So they filled them up to the brim. Now, this was done by the servants, again, employed at the feast. These were the workers there. These would be the waiters at the restaurant, right? It was done by them so that there might be no opportunity of saying that the disciples of Jesus had filled them with wine to produce the appearance of a miracle. So he wanted no opportunity that Jesus or anybody else associated with him that came later in the party, that they were the ones who made it look like it was a miracle. No, he wanted to make sure that it wasn't done by the disciples, that Jesus didn't do it, but that Jesus had the servants who would be the witnesses of this miracle to go and do the bidding of taking these water pots that could hold 20, 30 gallons of water and fill them up with water all the way to the brim, all the way to the top. So in this case, there could be no deception. There is no chances of, magician trickery, right? Which is what when people would do deceiving things. You think of how like we have these magicians now, the David Blaines and the Chris Angels. I believe that's his name, right? The famous magicians we have now that we think are amazing because they are really good at distracting our senses and making it look like magic, but really it's an illusion, right? So that's what I've been learning as I've seen little documentaries and shorts here and there about how magic is done. It's pretty amazing because when you're a kid and you see magic tricks, it's like, whoa, that's crazy, that's magic. But really, people who are magicians, they have these little tricks and devices that make it look like it's magic, but really it's a deception. And so Jesus didn't want this to make it look like it's they were pulling strings behind everything to make it seem like it's not really a miracle, but that it was some kind of trickery behind it. So the quantity was very considerable. The servants would know whether the wine or water had been put in these vessels. Like they were the ones who would know, right? They're not associated with Jesus and his disciples. They would be the one to know whether it was really wine or it was really water that they had put in there. It could not be believed that they had either the power or the disposition to impose on others in this manner, And the way was therefore clear for the proof that Jesus had really changed what was known to be water into wine. So again, just a really more complicated way to emphasize that they had no motivation to uh, make this look like a deceiving way of turning water into wine. Now it says, to the brim is all the way to the top, so full that no wine could be poured in to give the appearance of a mixture, right? So that if you fill it 75% and you pour a little bit of maybe extra concentrated wine, then it would dilute it down. Like, so if you think about, I don't know, man, drinks or things that you've had in concentrated form, whether I know there's some like undiluted, concentrated antifreeze if you have to deal with that, which I'm too lazy to do that. So I usually just get the 50-50 already diluted antifreeze, so I can just pour that in without having to take some. But even if it's like bleach and you got to go through a cleaning process and you got to, cut it down half or whatever your cleaning process, vinegar or whatever you're doing around the house, you've had chances to take concentrated, think about concentrated orange juice, right? That some may have, I don't even know if maybe anybody's really had much experience with that, with concentrated orange juice that you take and it's frozen, right? And you put it into the pitcher and then you pour water in to dilute it to where it's now at the right mixture. So that's the same thing they were doing, that Jesus was telling them, hey, fill it all the way to the top with water, so that there's no way that our people could have put extra concentrated wine in there so that when it mixed with the water that it was like at the right percentage. But no, that's all the way to the top. Further, vessels were used for this miracle in which wine had not been kept. These pots were never used to put wine in, but simply to keep water in for the various purposes of ablution, which is the act of washing oneself. So again, there is no confusion, right? These were water pots. These were not the pots that were used for holding the wine. These never, ever, ever was used for anything but for water, for the use of cleansing oneself. So a large number was used on this occasion because there were many guests. So thinking about how many water pots there were, that's a lot. We have a whole wedding ceremony with the whole town invited, and now you got Jesus' disciples coming and showing up. That's a lot of people, the whole town, and it's not just for one day. It's for like a whole week, many, many days. So this it's a lot to think about, right? That, man, that's a lot of water, and he's over here gonna perform a miracle. And then chapter 8 said, or verse 8, and he said to them, draw some out now and take it to the head waiter. So they took it to him. So I was here, losing point of my Bible study search here. Okay, my apologies. My little tablet's gone haywire on me. So draw out now. This command was given to the servants. It showed that the miracle had been performed immediately. It didn't take any amount of time where there could have been some mixing where disciples were running around from this pot to that pot. And think about it, right? We just talked about how many pots there could have been for the whole washing of every single person of the whole town over and over again throughout the night for many, many days, right? And this is at the end of or near the end, right, mid to the end of the festivities of many, many days, and because they're running out of wine, right? The reason why his mother Mary had called them to help. And so it showed that the miracle performed immediately. And as soon as they were filled, the servants were directed to take it to the governor of the feast. Right? Jesus made no parade about it. There was no celebration like, look what I did, right? He immediately had these servants, after he performed a miracle, take it straight to the head waiter, the person who was like, think about it, like the wedding planner, right? That's the person, they call it the head waiter or the governor of the feast. And it does not even appear that he approached the water pots. He didn't have to go lay his hands on it. He didn't have to go and go to every pot and touch it and turn it. Like, he just willed it. by sheer power of his divinity. Think about the Roman soldier that asked for Jesus to uh, bring his family to life, right? Um, Jesus was asked to help, and Jesus was gonna go and help, but yet the Roman soldier told Jesus, "You don't have to come. You just go. You just say it, and it will be done." Because just as he was a soldier, not just a soldier, but like a chief, a commander of an army, of a battalion, or for a platoon of soldiers, he could go make a command to his underlings, his soldiers, and they would go and do it. And this Roman commander had so much faith in Jesus that he believed that if Jesus just said it, then it would be done. That his divinity, his power, that he would command a legion of angels to go and minister and go do his willing, that he could do that. And Jesus commended him for his faith. That he even said that, man, he hasn't seen any faith as the faith that this man had. And so he can do that. He can do that. He willed it and it was done. This was a clear exertion of divine power, and made in such a manner as to leave no doubt of its reality. No doubt at all. Now, the governor or the head waiter is one who presided on the occasion, the one who stood at the head or upper end of the table. He had the charge of the entertainment, provided the food, and gave directions to the servants. So this is the guy in charge. He's the head waiter. He's the wedding planner. He's the one in charge of making sure that these festivities and how it's being conducted and make sure it goes smooth. He's the one in charge of it all. And so, let's see if we'll, want to go to verse 9 or not. We'll wait for verse 9. I got quite a few notes on this I want to go through. We're sitting on 17 minutes already. So, but yeah. So those are verses 6 through 8. So again, when we read the Bible, we have to understand that the Bible is broken down into very many various genres and various subgenres as well. So the Bible isn't just, as some people say, right, BIBLE, basic instructions before leaving earth, which is great saying, but at the same time, it's not that simple that the Bible is just a whole bunch of 66 chapters, 66 books of instructions for us to follow, and then that's how we get to heaven. No, it's a love letter from the Lord, and it comes in many forms. The Psalms are a book of prayers of his people to him, written by David and other prophets. The Song of Solomon's is more of a poem between lovers, of how men and wives are to be to one another. Book of Genesis is like a historical account of the beginning of life, the beginning of the creation of everything, the beginning of Jewish people, and then that whole story being carried out into the New Testament and in the Gospels, ultimately where Christ is formed. But then there's also the epistles, which are the letters of John that he wrote to the churches he has started, right? So the book of Corinthians is to the people of Corinth, Ephesians to the people of Ephesus, right? The book of Timothy, written to his what they call a spiritual son, his little mentee, since he was the mentor, like a spiritual father to Timothy, who had been in charge of one of the churches he had started. So, man, the Bible is comprised of a lot of different genres of literature. And so when we read certain parts of the Bible, it's not, sometimes we just get a complete and more clearer understanding of God's historical account of what what happened in the story. And so sometimes it's not going to always have application um, of how this applies to our life. Like, what can understanding uh, how many gallons these stone water pots hold, right? Like some things are just good to know to help us step outside of our current time frame of being living in this privileged life of understanding that we know to clean our hands, right? But being understand that like that wasn't a really well understood procedure to carry out on an everyday habitual basis at that time. But God had the wisdom to share that with His people, so that they are set apart and allowed to be healthy, to survive all the various diseases, bacteria, and viruses they would encounter from the lack of staying clean. And so, yeah, I mean, this is one of those moments now, and I'm sure there'll be many more where, we won't have the most exciting verses that we can take. It's like, oh man, that really spoke to me, and this is gonna help me change my outlook and perspective in life. And so, but hopefully, my introduction can help you understand that we all have to fight through that, and we all have some struggles in life. We all have moments where life can provide challenges in our situations. Life may not always go the way we want it to go, the way we expect things to go, but how do we handle it? How do we overcome it? How do we lean on people to give us an encouragement and motivation to overcome? So again, I mentioned talking to my wife about it, but then the Lord also sent my brother from college my way. He had been calling me for a while, and we finally got to talk on the way home from ministry today. And man, he blessed me so much, letting me know that he had been listening to the episodes and the shorts, and been watching and sharing it. And man, that blessed me so much, encouraged me to know that I can't get caught up in how many views and clicks I have, or how many people are coming to the Bible study, or how many people are wanting to join and be a blessing in the community, how many people are wanting to be the hands and feet of Christ in the community, and not just be a Sunday only Christian that goes to church for a Sunday. Like, I can't be caught up in that. I gotta be known that obedience is greater than sacrifice. That meaning that my obedience to what He's called me to is way more important than my profession of faith publicly, or the things I'm doing. It's just me just trusting Him that He will take what He's doing through me, and He will plant it, and He will get in the harvest of it. I'm just here planting and watering, and He will gain the harvest. So it's not for me to have expectations of how how these Bible studies are going to be perceived, how they're going to be received, how they're going to be shared, how it's going to grow, whether how many followers there's going to be, or how it's going to expand and be used. But I just have to be obedient. And so, it's definitely a learning lesson for me today. And hopefully you can learn from the struggles I've had today and apply to your own life. Think about what are some things that you're struggling with right now. What are some things that are not going your way, and you're experiencing frustration, you're experiencing, discontent, you're experiencing discouragement, and not really finding the motivation. And so you're running away, you're procrastinating, you're scrolling through Facebook instead of getting business done that God's called you to, or your career is needing from you, or your family is needing from you, or the tasks that are going to help you knock out the things that are priorities in your life. And yet we spend them scrolling on social media, or we spend it watching Netflix, or flipping through reels and shorts, but we're not spending the time to expand and grow our minds, our hearts, our souls, really building up our four walls of our life, that we are allowing, putting the time and the effort to grow ourselves. and those four walls being physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You know, so some self-reflections for us this week, especially for myself, to really, man, lock in and get more focused on not letting my flesh and my expectations get the best of me, but just to be grateful to be used, to be at this moment in time where, you know, as testimonies I've shared in the past, I shouldn't even be here. I shouldn't be alive. I shouldn't have, I've made so many mistakes in my life and in my marriage, with my family, with my friends that I've lost along the way. Like, I've made a lot of mistakes, and yet I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm blessed beyond all measure that I can even comprehend. And so I gotta always constantly remind myself to continue to dwell in that state of gratefulness instead of, and that's something that I have to teach my daughters all the time. I have to remind them, and it's like God's reminding me, like, yeah, you got to practice what you preach, and that is to stay in a state of gratefulness. Count every blessings. Remember having to show my daughter pictures of kids with no feet when she was struggling with issues with her ankle that she had hurt, and she had took many months, and she kept re-injuring it over and over. Whether it started in gymnastics, and then she was doing cheerleading, and she had re-injured it, and it's a long way to recovery, going from being in a boot to a brace to even learning, going through therapy sessions as well, physical therapy, and overcoming that. But yet, we have to remind ourselves, like, what are some things that we're complaining about that we still are experiencing blessings? What are some challenges we have that are blinding us from seeing the blessings in our life and allowing us to count every blessing? So, praying that this was a blessing to you. Excuse me. Starting to lose my breath and my voice, so looking forward to talking again next week, and y'all be blessed.